After taking public transportation to the Seattle airport, I boarded my Lufthansa flight to Frankfurt and then onward to Zagreb, Croatia. I was pleased that Lufthansa was now serving regular food rather than the packaged fare received during the COVID-era flights I had taken earlier. My 3-week adventure in Croatia began with some help from an airport worker who showed me where to catch a bus and tram to downtown Zagreb. I was in Zagreb on Corpus Cristi Day, a Christian holiday, so many of the museums and markets were closed during the 2 days I was there. I did not spot any big celebrations though, but the many side street restaurants were packed with people enjoying the holiday and the beautiful warm weather. The Ban Jelačić Square is a central meeting place and heart of Zagreb. It honors the 19th century governor who failed in an attempt to gain autonomy for Croatians against Hungary. The horse-mounted statue displays Ban Jelačić. Here are 2 other horse-mounted heroes. King Tomislav was the first king of Croatia in 926. He had alliances with the Byzantines and fought against the Bulgarian and Hungarian empires. The Dolac Market, located between the upper and lower town, is normally a bustling fruit, vegetable, dairy, and meat market, but with the Corpus Cristi holiday, it was closed. The presidential palace on the left is clustered with the St. Mark's Church and the parliament called Sabor. The St. Mark's Catholic Church, built in the 13th century, had the tile roof added in 1880, which features the medieval coat of arms of Croatia, Dalmatia, Slavonia, and Zagreb. Church of the Virgin Mary. This cathedral, built in the 13th century, was heavily damaged by an earthquake in 1880 and again in 2020. They are still restoring it. The stone gate became a place considered to have miraculous powers after a big fire in 1731 destroyed all but the painting of the Virgin and Child. People come to pray, light candles, and leave flowers by the painting. There are even a few rows of pews for worshippers who want to linger. The Lorshak Tower was built in the 13th century to protect the city. It was closed, but the street views of the city below were still pretty good. The nearby blue funicular connects the upper and lower towns and was built in 1888. Here was another missed opportunity to visit this museum. because of the Corpus Cristi holiday. However, the nearby Museum of Broken Relationships was open with its many mementos of ended relationships. The Virgin Mary water bottle is one example. Upon leaving, her lover left this bottle along with a goodbye note indicating that he had brought it hoping to find a new love. He didn't know that she had earlier seen his bag full of these water bottles. The Zagreb Park is one of 8 parks downtown and is filled with flowers and water fountains. There are art galleries, museums, and a music pavilion for tourists and locals to enjoy. The Petar Preradović Square is in the process of restoration, from being abandoned buildings to vibrant restaurants and shops. After visiting the train station, I came across these other buildings that were closed for the holidays. I was pleased to see that the many walking street-side restaurants were open and had lots of customers. Most of them seemed to be locals, though. Pizza was the most popular fare. While here, I stayed at the Spica hostel, and I was the only person in the 8-bed dorm room. The other rooms had been filled with construction workers and long-term residents since tourism was down because of COVID-19. In the morning, I took the tram out to the bus station to catch a bus to the Lake Plitvice National Park, about 2.5 hours away. Instead of 8 buses per day to the park, there were only 2 because of the lack of tourists. Even with fewer bus runs, there were few passengers on my morning bus. At the entrance to Lake Plitvice National Park, they have 2 maps, one showing the 16 lakes and waterfalls from above, and the other with a profile picture that shows the drops in elevation from one lake to the next. These lakes are separated by tufa formations consisting of porous limestone and vegetation. Water gushes over and through these formations. The limestone colors the lakes, turquoise and green. This is a very well-maintained and managed national park, with comfortable free shuttle buses and electric ferry boats, beautiful wooden walkways that take you along and over some of the waterways, and very descriptive signage. No swimming is allowed, so the waters stay uncontaminated. You may wonder why are these lakes so turquoise and green in color. Here's what I found out. When the sunlight hits the water, the suspended calcite crystals absorb the shortest wavelengths, dark blues and purples. The water absorbs the longer wavelengths, reds, oranges, and yellows. What remain are the blue and green wavelengths, which are reflected back to our eyes with the suspended calcite crystals amplifying these blues and greens since the crystals act like prisms. The numerous waterfalls and cascades keep the calcite crystals in suspension rather than settling on the bottom of the lakes. I began my hike after taking the shuttle bus near entrance 2 and my Hotel Jezero to the top lake, Koskansko. From Lake Shiginovac on down to Kozyak Lake, I would go down many wooden walkways, past 7 lakes and one waterfall or cascade after another. At the end of the 6-mile upper lake walk, I caught the electric ferry boat that took me about 2.5 miles to the end of Kozyak Lake. And walked a bit up to the entrance 1, where another shuttle bus route took me back to my Hotel Jezero near entrance 2. I spent 2 nights at the Hotel Jezero, which included a 2-day park admission fee of about $40 and 2 full buffet breakfasts. I also enjoyed a whirlpool spa along with a deck view of the park from my room. With no other restaurants nearby, the other meals were excellent as well. At a cost of $105 per night, this was my most expensive hotel of the trip. After a big breakfast, I took the shuttle bus back to where I'd left off the day before and began my hike down to the lower lakes, which would culminate at the tallest waterfall in Croatia, Velika Slap. The Veliki waterfall is the highest in Croatia at 255 feet. It is fed by the Plitvice National Park river. From here, I backtracked to the park concession area and caught the ferry boat back to the start of the Upper Lake Trail. I retraced my hike of the day before and again enjoyed seeing these amazing lakes, waterfalls, and cascades. After hiking about 10 miles, I returned to the Proskansko Lake bus stop for a return ride back to my hotel Zadar near entrance 2. Once again, I had a great lunch and dinner, followed by the whirlpool spa, which soothed my tired legs. The following day, I decided it would be more comfortable riding the 9:30 a.m. bus to Zadar in the rain rather than hiking in it. I flagged the bus down, and it turned out I was the only passenger, another COVID-19 tourist experience. The forest gave way to hilly farmland and then open fields. We connected with a toll road that was in excellent condition, and we went through a number of tunnels. One was 3.6 miles long. When we pulled into Zadar about 11 a.m., I realized I could take another bus to Novalja, about 1.5 hours north. Unlike the other bus rides, this one was fairly full with people getting off and on along the way. It was advertised as an air-conditioned bus, but none of us could feel it. We passed along some very rocky landscape, punctuated by miles and miles of crisscrossing rock walls which didn't seem to reduce the rubble on the ground for the goats and sheep. From the Novalja bus station, it was a 15-minute walk into downtown to the Casa La Cha hostel, which was right on the waterfront. The beaches here consist of small, light-colored pebbles instead of sand, with very few vacationers. Apparently, the big party Zadar Beach is about 4 kilometers from Novalja. At the hostel, I was met by Margarita, the owner, and her daughter Lucia, who booked me into an upstairs dorm of 2 bunk beds with a deck that overlooked the entire harbor at a cost of 80 kuna, or $12.70 per night. They told me I would be the only one in that room. Before COVID-19 pandemic, they told me they would be booked for the entire summer season. They said people were now just beginning to return. Here is the ocean view from my room, and as the sun set, I enjoyed watching it from my deck hammock. Most restaurants were closed, but I found this one, but I had to wait until 8 a.m. for the chef to arrive. After breakfast, I walked over to the Zadar beach, expecting to see lots of people swimming and lounging on the beach chairs, but no, the place was virtually empty. I bought a cooler from the Serbian server who said I was her first customer. She said she learned English from watching movies, so she understood better than she could speak. With the cooler, she said I could use one of her lounge chairs, so I read a bit of my book before moving on to some of the other venues that had few people. Here's hoping crowds will return later this summer. Only construction crews were at the Noah Beach Club. Here are some pictures of the party scene back in 2019 at various clubs. The Papaya Club was rated number 6 best club in the world by the DJ Mag 2017 list, and the Aquarius Club was among one of the top 100s. On big nights, each club draws about 5,000 partygoers. On my way back, I got caught in an unexpected rainstorm and got completely soaked. Once in town, I stopped at the Moby Dick for a lunch of sword steak with a combination of spinach or chard and potatoes. As the sun set, I planned my return to Zadar and onward to Šibenik. It was a pleasant ride back to Zadar as we dipped into each beachside village on the way. They used to have 6 bus runs per day, but with COVID-19, they reduced it to 3 times per day, and I took the noon bus. I had enough time to have lunch at the Zadar bus station before heading to Šibenik. When we crossed this bridge, I could see Šibenik in the distance. It was just a 200-yard walk up the stairs from the Šibenik bus station to the hostel Splendido. Violet, the manager, described the attractions of Šibenik, and then she booked me into a 4-bunk room where I was the only occupant. What a delight. To travel on these kind of party boats, it costs from $1,000 to $2,000 for 7 days, plus the cost of food, booze, and tips. After dinner by the waterfront with a long row of sailboats, I started walking back to the hostel when I heard some music coming from a nearby park. I was amazed that there were so many people gathering together like there was never any COVID-19 pandemic. The DJ played lots of different music as people got in line at the many vendors selling beverages and finger foods. The following day, I visited the 2 fortresses above the city, Barone and St. Michael's. With just 7,000 defenders, they vanquished the 28,000 Ottoman invaders in 1647. The St. John fortress was closed for reconstruction. Both the Barone and St. Michael's fortresses had some great AV displays that highlighted the history of Šibenik, which was one of the few cities that repelled the Ottoman invasion. On the way to the bus station, I passed by the beautiful Šibenik Library and Plaza. Normally, buses go to the Croatia National Park 7 times per day, but with COVID, there were only 3. The trip started with a boat ride that was included in the price of the admission to the beginning of the Stradinsky Bach, where we followed a boardwalk path around most of these amazing waters. Other than here in Croatia, I've never seen such water flows like these. This park has similar geologic features I saw at the Plitvice Lake National Park, with the limestone tuffers that create gushing waterfalls and cascades with water oozing out of the limestone openings. The Krka National Park contains a monastery, grain mills, restaurants, a church, and the second oldest hydroelectric plant after Niagara Falls, and it was designed by Tesla. The Tesla AC patent system was used on both power plants. I got back to Scranton way before the next bus to Sebenek, so I had a great pork chop meal near the park entrance and bus stop. St. Michael's Fortress was the second open fortress I visited. It has a cemetery and a big open-air stage. I watched an interesting AV stories of the creation of Sebenek, complete with fire-breathing dragons and creatures emerging from the fires and ooze, ending with a triumphant St. Michael's. St. Francis Church. The St. James Cathedral and Museum was interesting to visit because it used no wood in its construction and is a World Heritage Site. There are 71 heads carved into the outside wall. They have an AV feature in the museum that allows you to create a sculpture of yourself. Check it out. I took the 8:30 a.m. bus to Split that drove along the Dalmatian coastline and stopped at a number of villages along the way. Instead of 12 buses per day to Split, there were now just 6. Small pebble beaches and rocky shores seemed to be the norm along the Adriatic Sea. The Split bus station was co-located with several long piers filled with passenger and auto ferry boats and the faster catamarans. It was a short walk to the walled old city of Split, where I would find the downtown hostel. This was the first hostel in 2 weeks where I ended up sharing a dorm room with someone else, a traveler from Poland. I explored the Old Town area, including the Diocletian's Palace, the Cathedral of St. Dominus, where I climbed its bell tower, and saw a Netflix film crew that was working on a romantic drama. The Diocletian's Palace Plaza is a popular place for wedding parties and other celebrations. And saw a Netflix film crew that was working on a romantic drama. I enjoyed feasting on the meals and visiting markets here in Split. While dining, I met a Norwegian who recommended that I visit Hvar Island for a day, which I ended up doing. With COVID-19 and the drop in tourists, there were only 3 boat departures per day instead of 7. The ride took just an hour. Normally, Hvar Island draws about 20,000 people per day, but now there were fewer than 1,000. I enjoyed walking along the rock-lined shoreline, but saw many restaurants and resorts that had curtailed services. I enjoyed going up the narrow walkways past several restaurants and shops until I arrived at the Fortica Castle. The Fortica Castle was first built by the Byzantines in the 6th century, improved by the Venetians between 1278 and 1551, and it later protected the townspeople from the Turk invasion in 1571 when the Turks sacked the town. Here are a pair of Dalmatians in Dalmatia. Port is a popular wedding photo spot. I enjoyed a pasta dinner before catching the 5:30 p.m. departure back to Split. Now that it is mid-June, the hostel is filling up and I'm seeing more tourists, especially Americans. The following day, I took a 40-minute bus ride to Troger. The medieval town of Troger is on an island partially surrounded by walls, with walking streets that were narrow and worn, with many high-end shops, restaurants, and gelato temptations. I enjoyed a moussaka casserole while watching the sailboats come and go. The St. Lawrence Cathedral is a three-nave Venetian cathedral, which is one of the finest architectural works in Croatia. It was built between the 13th and 15th centuries. I climbed up the bell tower for some great views of the city below and the surrounding sea and countryside. My next destination was Dubrovnik by catamaran, which left at 7:40 a.m. Before departing, I enjoyed another big breakfast at the One-Eyed Pig Cafe, just across from the pier where my catamaran was moored. I boarded the Kilo catamaran for the 4.5-hour trip down to Dubrovnik, with several stops at some of the Adriatic islands. Our first stop was Brac, followed by Hvar, which I had visited on a day trip from Split. boat had an open top deck, which was great to use for taking pictures and being able to take off the mask. There were few passengers on this boat, which was similar to all my public transportation experiences in Croatia. The third island stop was Korčula. It was a walled town, followed by a stop at Milček. Our final stop was Dubrovnik, and as we came into the harbor, we saw a huge cruise ship docked on our same pier.
Dear passengers, we are arriving at port of Dubrovnik. Thank you.
It was a short walk to the bus stop that took me to the Pile neighborhood stop, about 2.5 miles from the piers. As I got off the bus, the walled old town of Dubrovnik and the Pile gate was right before me, complete with a drawbridge. First headed to the Lovrjanak fort that looks over the old town, but first I visited the Love Stories Museum. This museum is a counterpoint to the Museum of Broken Relationships I saw in Zagreb. Here people describe their love stories on post-its. In the 11th century, the Venetians attempted to build this fort, but the people of Dubrovnik beat them to it by building their own fort within 3 months. The Venetians were repulsed and returned home. Today, this fort hosts theater and high diving venues. I then entered Pile Gate by first walking across the drawbridge. After entering, I saw the wide Plaka walkway, and just to the right was the grand fountain of Onofre, with several of its gargoyles spouting drinking water. I headed up some stairs and walked around the old city walls that gave me broad views of the city and surrounds. I reached the Buka beach by going through this gate in the wall and walked down the stairs to a cafe. Below the cafe, I enjoyed a brisk swim in the Adriatic Sea, where you could jump off rocks into the sea from 1 to 10 meters high. I chose the 1 meter jump and enjoyed others going off the highest rocks. As I entered the old town, I immediately saw the grand Onofre's fountain, built in 1438, where the gargoyles spew water from their mouths from a water source some 7.5 miles away. Dubrovnik has a variety of museums to choose from, and I first went to the Salvador Dali Museum. I then visited the War Photo Limited Museum that featured Dubrovnik during the Homeland War, along with other wars and victims of wars. I passed through the Buza Gate on the east side of the walled city to get to the cable car station. The Imperial Fortress and the communication towers were bombed during the 1991 to 95 Homeland War.
So that's the old port of the city, where those small boats.
Starting near the harbor, I took the walk around the perimeter of the old city and enjoyed some spectacular views. The brighter and newer roof tiles replaced the ones that were damaged during the Homeland War from the bombing by the Yugoslavian military, despite protests from the UNESCO since it was a World Heritage Site. Over 2,000 shells pummeled Dubrovnik between 1991 and 1992. There is a photo exhibit of this war in Fort Imperial on the SRD mountain, which still has bullet and bomb markings on the walls. The people of Dubrovnik have endured and rebuilt after the war. This harbor provides the getaway to surrounding islands, including Lokrum, which I visited with its many rocky shores for swimming and peacocks roaming freely. The Dubrovnik area was a perfect backdrop for filming of the Game of Thrones, and they have tours to the film spots and thrones for picture taking. It makes me want to see the series to see how they have incorporated the city into the movie. I saw a similar thing in Morocco. Lokrum has a number of restaurants, and at this one by the Dead Sea, kids were frequently jumping off the rocks to the amusement of me and other customers. I then checked out the rocky beaches where more people were swimming, kayaking, and jumping off the cliffs into the sea. Out here, there was a big football match between Croatia and Czech Republic, which ended up in a draw. Most restaurants had pulled out TVs for its enthusiastic fans, and many fans were wearing the Croatian team colors. Because of the lack of tourists, many restaurants offered discounts from 20 to 50%. I took advantage of this by enjoying some excellent meals of meat and seafood that were well plated and tasty as well at the Re Silva 1 restaurant. Plans to travel by bus to Greece were thwarted because all international buses through Montenegro, Macedonia, Albania, and Greece were canceled by COVID-19 and a lack of tourists. Instead, I flew to Athens by air via Madrid and London. My UK transfer to Athens required me to take a COVID test. Fortunately, the Dubrovnik airport had a rapid antigen test at their airport that gave me results within 15 minutes.